In this coffee talk, Pastor Pascale Williams, our discipleship pastor, and Pastor Ken Chapman, our children's and youth pastor, discuss what healthy spiritual leadership should look like.
So let me ask you another question. Let's take a look here. Okay, what does healthy spiritual leadership look like?
I like that question.
Why do you like that question?
Well, because I have had both healthy and unhealthy spiritual leaders in my life. And as a minister, as a leader in the church, I want to model healthy spiritual leadership. So what does it look like? I think it's first the acknowledgement that you are not the owner, the controller of the people that God has you serve. So when someone comes to me, let's say wants to meet in my office or to ask me advice or counsel, the very first thing I ask them is, what did the Lord tell you? I should always be the second person they come to. Spiritual leadership is never about control or manipulation or domination. To be honest with you, that's a form of witchcraft. Now, we understand it from the form of the kingdom of darkness.
Sure.
You know, demons and Satan want to dominate people. God, who owns us, does not control us. There isn't one scripture in the Bible where God says he controls his people. He leads them. God does not manipulate us. He doesn't dominate us. He gives us free will. So as a spiritual leader, if I am not careful or we are not careful and we're not humble to understand that people belong to God, not to us. People are not there to serve us. We're there to serve them. And so if someone comes and puts me on a platform, immediately I will push back. If they start to elevate or think that they can't make a decision without me or they can't go to God alone, I immediately have to correct the understanding of our relationship because that often happens. And so unhealthy leadership is when you don't have that view. It's when you see yourself as someone who is the Holy Spirit in someone's life, and you have people come to you because you need them. There could be sole reasons why, you feel like you have to have people, you have to have a following, but it's never about that. It's never, we are leader servants. So healthy spiritual leadership has to do with a clear understanding of what your purpose is. That God is God and God must always be God, or else you become an idol in the lives of people. And that's very easy to do, especially leaders that are very gifted. Because God gives us, we're endowed with ability supernaturally to preach, to teach. The Bible even talks to teachers like myself. Not too many of us ought to be teachers because our giftings, we can influence people to do things that perhaps is good for us, but not for them. So every person has a responsibility to hear God for themselves. And we need to, as leaders, help people to grow and develop in their own journey with God. I love I think it's the proverb or the saying that says, if a man is hungry and he comes to you and you give him a fish, you will satisfy his hunger, but he will have to come back to you again the next day if he's hungry. But if you teach the person how to fish, you will satisfy their hunger for a lifetime and they won't have to keep coming to you. So spiritual leadership is not about having people follow you around and elevate you and promote you. It's about helping people to grow up in their relationship with God. Because if you're a healthy spiritual leader, you know you're a leader servant. You're there to serve that person, help them grow, help them to develop. And anytime they are unwilling to grow, I usually say, you know what, I'm not your leader. Because that means that I'm not fulfilling my purpose. So we can't be in relationship to a certain degree because number one, I'm not helping you. Or if they go the opposite extreme, they lift you up or exalt you, I'm going to stop that relationship. I'm going to cut that off as well because that is not my role and that is not my purpose. So I think I would just say that healthy spiritual leadership is understanding and being very clear. And so it's a place of humility where you are gifted, you're empowered by God, and God allows his precious sons and daughters, imagine that, to come under your stewardship. And you always know you're going to have to give an account.
Yeah.
So when they hear from God, even when someone decides that they're going to leave the church or pursue something that perhaps you think is not best for them, if they tell me, I have prayed, I have sought the Lord, and I have peace in my heart that this is what I need to do, I tell them that's exactly what they should do. I don't change their mind. Because it's not my role to correct them if they've taken the steps for making decisions. I'm all about growing and developing people. And spiritual leaders are not about keeping people in the kindergarten or elementary school. And that's also very hard for spiritual leaders, because a healthy spiritual leader is willing to let the little eaglets fly on their own.
I like to think of it in terms of a pool, right? So if you're the swimming instructor, you start out in the little, where it's, knee deep, and you just kind of give them the idea of what does the water feel like? And then once they start to move, you can kind of graduate them into the, where they're less dependent on you and more dependent on their own skill. That's wonderful.
Right.
What are, as you kind of talk about spiritual leadership and the kind of almost the temptation of idol worship in a way, right? And becoming the object of that. As a believer, what should I be looking for? What characteristics should I be looking for in a good spiritual leader? How can I decipher if someone is a good spiritual leader or possibly not?
Okay, wow, let me think. You will know them by their fruit. Just like with the Bible talks about a false prophet, you will know them by their fruit. I think it's important before you choose someone to submit to or to counsel or to advise you, you need to know whether they are advisable. They have those, because what happens is that people with giftings can influence you, as I said earlier, but you have to, number one is, the first thing is you have to ask the Lord, right? Because just like sheep need shepherds, and so there are people that God will put in your life, and sometimes it's for a season. Sometimes God will put a leader in your life just for a moment in time. It doesn't mean that they're permanently there, because you may be moving in a different direction and God is moving them in another direction, and so you're not going to be in agreement. So first of all, you have to ask God. Number two, I think you have to have the peace in your heart. When you're in their presence, or you're in the room with them, or in the environment with them, they are depositing in you. You feel and you sense deposits. When you leave their presence, you take away something. If you're with a leader and all they do is pull and take from you, something is wrong. There's an imbalance. Now, of course, I believe in the law of mutual agreement, mutual benefit. It's not just one person doing all the giving and the other person doing all the taking, but a spiritual leader has a responsibility to deposit into your life, so that when you leave them, you walk away like, that was delicious. You ate at the table with them, and the food should taste good. Now, you may have vegetables they may be serving, but there is where the meal has been prepared for you, with you in mind, okay? And there are times when, you meet people that are gifted, but they are not the ones that God has placed to be that leader in your life. Now, just like with I'm sure with you, I have my pastor, Pastor John Carter, who is the lead shepherd in my life. He's the voice that God uses. He's the steady, okay? I have other ministers that I listen to who are teachers, but I never, ever make them my pastor.
That's good.
And especially now, we have people that are following prophets. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that sheep follow prophets around. So prophets have gifts, voices, but they can't lead in that way. They're never called to lead in that way. Every sheep needs to submit. So under a shepherd. And whenever you cross, again, we talked about boundaries, you don't know the boundaries of people, roles, responsibilities, whether you are the receiver or the giver, you're going to end up with challenges.
That's good. So as a spiritual leader, and this could include the head of the household or a spiritual head of a household, any everywhere in between, up to a minister, up to Pastor John or someone at his level, what do we do to keep ourselves, because it seems like the great temptation would be to dangle this kind of fame, almost idolization that people give, because it feels good to have people love you. We all desire it. We all crave it. Every human does. What do we do to kind of shield ourselves from that, from not accepting that sort of temporary, very fleshy kind of acceptance, to maintain that actual correct standing in people's lives.
Well, there's something in us that is, I'm going to use the word, it's called laziness. Okay? I mean, if I can just let you do all the work and I can just be the baby in the room and, you change my diapers and you do everything. I mean, I'll do whatever I have to do to make you feel special. And if you're receiving it from me, then I'm lifting you up. And if you're receiving it from me and you're allowing it to happen, which is what's happened many times in spiritual leadership relationships, where it's all about people growing up. If you look at your life and you say, okay, a year ago, 2 years ago, am I exactly the same? You have to question. I mean, I would question, are you growing up? And why aren't you growing up? The person who's supposed to feed you, deposit into your life, help you grow and develop, are they doing their job? I mean, just think about it. If your children, you have 3, correct?
Correct,
You still have 3?
Yeah, 2 boys and a little girl. Yep.
You have spiritual children. But imagine if little Charlotte, I think she's 5 years old, went to kindergarten, and then 3 years later she's still in kindergarten, and 5 years later she's still in kindergarten, because the teacher and Charlotte don't want to move. They have a great relationship. They're happy. We love. But you know what? Think about it. Kindergarten is wonderful. You get to play. You get to do art. You get to do music. You get to take naps. Okay? There's a lot of work involved, all right?
Yeah.
But as you start to grow, more responsibility is given to you. And I think that's really being clear. So whether or not you are the receiver, okay, so in other words, you have a person who's supposed to be a spiritual leader in your life, and you're not growing, you need to question that.
Yeah.
Or if you're the person who is the spiritual leader and you're depositing and the person's not receiving and doesn't want to grow, you got to question that as well.
That's great. So it's being aware of the fruit of the leaders
fruit.
In your life, but also your own fruit.
You will know.
And if you aren't tracking that fruit, if it's not tracking with time, there might be some questions to be asked. That is a great answer. I appreciate that.